Good afternoon, Cynthia. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, good to see everybody.
Good afternoon, Melissa. Can we do a quick sound check, please?
Hey there, this is Erin. I'm not sure if I logged in under Melissa or not. She did forward me the invite. So if this is showing as Melissa, it's Erin.
All right, Erin, I will we'll update that right now for you.
Thank you. Well, I'm working remotely, so I'm doing a desktop and a cell phone for different audio, and so I'm logging in twice, but it's
Okay.
definitely me.
Thanks. I see that coming in now. Ms. Stark, can we do a quick audio check, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Lorena, can we do a sound check, please?
I was sorry, I was trying to look for the button. How are you?
Well, thank you. Part of the sound check fun is, navigating the new features of Zoom. Thanks for joining us today. Stephen, how about you? Can we do a quick mic check?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yep.
We're going to give just a couple more minutes for others to join before we get started today, but thank you everyone for dialing in a bit early. Good afternoon, Adonis. Can we do a mic check, please?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Christina, can we do a mic check, please?
Hello.
Yes, thank you so much. Just wanted to make sure we could hear you just fine. Thank
Sorry,
you.
I thought it was another Christy. I was like waiting.
Miss Morris, my apologies.
No worries.
Emily, can we do a sound check, please?
Hello, everyone.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Emily.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm eating lunch, so I didn't think you wanted to see that, but I will turn my camera on once I'm done.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'll just give one more minute to see who else shows up, and then we'll get things kicked off here. Miles, good afternoon. Can we do a quick mic check, please?
Afternoon.
Thank you. You are heard. Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for dialing in today for this virtual project visioning meeting for the 10th Street study. My name is Alex Trauger, and I am the Metro Plan Orlando's project manager for this complete street study. I am joined today by our consultant team, Megan, Jeff, and Melissa, who you'll each hear from today. But before we jump into the presentation and discussion, just a few housekeeping items. This meeting is being recorded and is being live streamed to Metro Plan Orlando's YouTube channel. This meeting was also advertised on Metro Plan Orlando's website, social media, as well as through some targeted emails. We will have a public comment period. Go to the next slide, please. We will have a public comment period later on in the agenda. So members of the public who wish to be heard can use that raise hand feature on the Zoom screen. And if members of the public are only joining in by phone, you can hit *9 and raise your hand, and you'll be to request to be recognized. When you're called, use your microphone, obviously. Will be temporarily unmuted by staff. We'll ask you to state your name and contact information for the record. And again, that public comment period will follow today's presentation. Go to the next slide. We also want this in all future online meetings hosted by Metro Plan Orlando to be accessible to all. So participants may join by their phone, computer, or tablet. If you need any accommodations to participate in a future meeting, please do contact Metro Plan Orlando staff. So with that, I will turn things over to Megan Ferguson, our consultant project manager, to lead us through today's discussion. Megan?
All right, thanks, Alex, and thanks everyone for being here today and having us. I'm Megan Ferguson. I'm helping lead up this study. I'm joined with Jeff Arms, principal in charge, and Melissa Porcaro, who has been involved in a lot of the elements of putting this study together. So here's our agenda for today. We want to just touch a little bit on where we've been so far with the existing conditions. We know last time we met was back in the summer of 2021, so it's been a little over 6 months to just refresh our memories. We'll touch on some of the key highlights there. We'll go through some of the public involvement we've conducted over the last year. And then the part we want to spend the most time on is the alternatives assessment, where we have some proposed ideas we would like your feedback on. Here's a list of everyone involved in this process. And again, we really thank everyone for being on the call today and taking time out of their day to give feedback and share thoughts on this study. We intend for this session to be pretty interactive, so we're going to ask for feedback in a couple of different ways. The chat box is going to be used quite a bit, so just a reminder to make sure that your chat is set to everyone so that we can all share and receive feedback. We'd also like to hear from you over the microphone. So we're going to be using the raise hand feature there, and Melissa will be monitoring the chat, and we'll be able to call on individual speakers to unmute and share your concerns. So we thought, what better way to practice using the chat than start with an icebreaker question? We would love to hear from you what TV show everyone is watching right now. I'm into the dramas and some crime mysteries, so I just finished the latest season of Ozark. Very excited for the next and final season to come out, but while I wait for that, I also started Yellowstone. I know that's a popular one, I've heard. So Melissa, are we getting any responses on TV shows everyone's watching?
Yeah, so we have a couple of people responding now. Someone's about to start the next season of Cobra Kai. Someone else is watching Yellowstone. Some sports, Euphoria, that's a popular one. Yeah, Money Heist. When someone started Numbers, that's an older one.
I do remember that one.
The Good Place. Oh, The Good Place is a favorite. Book of Boba Fett. Oh, that's really popular too. Yeah, we're getting a lot of really good responses here. All things I enjoy watching.
Nice, a lot across the board. I keep getting advertisements for Cobra Kai on Netflix, so maybe I'll have to start that one of these days. We have Super Bowl coming up, so a lot to stay up to date. Thanks everyone for your participation there. We'll be asking for some more feedback on the study, probably in about 20 minutes or so when we get to the alternatives. All right, and here's a quick background of what the 10th Street study is and where we've been. It's a planning study all the way from US 192 to Narcoossee Road, which ends up being about 4 miles, and it goes right through the heart of downtown St. Cloud, which is about at the middle of 10th Street between Massachusetts and Florida Ave. The approach we're taking for this project is a complete streets approach. So we're looking to prioritize the most vulnerable road users, people walking, people biking, while still allowing traffic to flow. And these are some of the principles we're going to be carried forward as we propose improvements for the area. One thing we did want to note up front is that the approach is to not take any new right-of-way. We would stay within the current public realm. So there's no proposal of taking properties or anything like that. We're on an 18-month schedule, started last January 2021. So we're about a year and change in, and we'll be starting to do concept drawings after this meeting, and we get concurrence on potential ideas. I'll be finishing up that in the early summer. This is a more detailed look at our schedule. It shows some of the different outreach points that we've had. And I would say the most important thing to pull from this slide is the bottom row, the last item, which is a project video we're going to be preparing about the same time as the concept development is completed. So it'll be easy to say what's proposed and kind of take you as a fly through of the improvements along the corridor. The goals for this area were developed based on feedback from our first project visioning team meeting and through discussion with other stakeholders. First and foremost, we want to prioritize safety, but another big one we heard was to maintain the small town charm of St. Cloud. So that's that community goal that we have in the upper right. The existing conditions data that we wanted to pull as being one of the really key highlights for this area was the crashes that we saw along 10th Street. This is looking at crashes that happened in the past 5 years. So the top one, where there are numbers, shows where there was either a pedestrian or a bicycle crash. And the bottom map shows all crashes in terms of injury severity, so where people were seeing the worst injuries. We're lucky to not see any fatalities here, but some of the high crash locations were Columbia Avenue, Michigan Avenue, and Orange Avenue. Another relevant piece of data was the city collected speed data along the corridor, and we saw that the highest speeds were clocked on the eastern end of 10th Street, just east of Mississippi or Eastern Ave, where there's that S-curve. And in this area, the houses are further set back from the roadway, so it feels a little bit more open, which explains why vehicles are traveling faster in this area. It'll also help us inform what kind of speed management techniques we use in that section, which we'll get into later. And finally, we know there are some great plans for trails and bike connectivity through the study area. So this is a reminder that we'll want to make sure anything proposed can integrate seamlessly into these already planned connections. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Melissa to talk about the public involvement that we've done so far.
Great, thanks, Megan. Again, my name is Melissa Porcaro. I'm a transportation planner with HDR. I've been really focused on the public involvement pieces here with this study. So what we have here, you'll see some information from the Kickoff Survey, which was the first survey we did when we first started. This might be a bit of a summary for some of you all, but we thought it was important to re-go over it with you guys. Over 500 people responded to the Kickoff Survey, and we got a lot of really good feedback about what some of the top challenges along 10th Street were, including places to safely ride a bike, the gaps in the sidewalk, safely crossing the street, and vehicle speeding. So we took those ideas and kind of moved forward with them in our goals and objectives, as well as putting them into our alternatives. Right now, we're in the middle of our alternative survey, so some of what you'll see now, the public has also been seeing. We've talked about it in the online survey as well as in our public engagement that we've been out in St. Cloud doing. As of the end of the month, we've had over 250 respondents. There's been a lot of positive responses about the alternatives and the familiarity with Roundabouts, as well as our other intersection solutions. So we're hoping we're going to get a lot more respondents throughout the month, since the survey does close at the end of February. Again, the online comment map you'll see here was something we did in the beginning of the study as part of the kickoff. This also helped develop what we were going to be working on with the alternatives. This gave us a lot of feedback into where people saw some of those dangerous intersections, Columbia, Vermont, Mississippi, places like that. So this helped inform us where we were going to be looking at specifically. And then here are some of the outreach events we've done so far. We've gone to 2 St. Cloud monthly markets, one in November, and then one a couple of weeks ago at the end of January, actually last week. So this has been a really great involvement. We've been able to speak with over 100 different people, a lot who lived around or near 10th Street. So really great, like, local feedback that we've been using throughout this alternative phase, as well as the St. Cloud Cyclovia event, or Cyclovia, some people say it differently, but that event was really cool because, again, it was like interacting with locals as well as people who normally do bike in the area. So now we're going to be opening this up for a 5-minute discussion. If there's anything anybody wants to talk about from the project overview phase or the public engagement phase. And again, if you're using the chat, please make sure to change it to everyone so that everyone gets to see your thoughts and comments.
I just wanted to check too. This is Jeff. We got a raised hand, but it's people can chat in if you were new and you did not participate in the first PBT, or maybe you need more information. Maybe we could follow up with you afterwards. So I just wanted to make sure we captured any new people, me or new staff member or things. But with that, I guess we'll turn it over, see what Beverly wants to add. Do someone need to unmute Beverly, or she automatically can unmute herself and go?
I think you can unmute yourself, Beverly, if I'm mistaken. Maybe Alex can do it on Metro Plan Orlando's end.
It looks unmuted, yeah.
We're not hearing you, Beverly, but at the next break, if you'd like to try to unmute again, if there's some audio connection issues, we're happy to open up the floor again.
Alex, anything there? You sure fits into that sound?
Oh, Beverly, she disappeared. She might be restarting.
Okay, she's restarting.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can move on. We'll check back in with Beverly when she signs back in.
She's on.
So
Sorry, Beverly, if you can hear us, if you go down to the little upward carrot button near your mute, you'll see a menu where you can switch to phone audio, maybe switching over to a phone connection. You'll have better luck with that.
I don't see any chat from anyone who said that they were new. I confirm that there's nobody new. So I think we've got a pretty engaged group. We'll let your lack of questions slide on this first break, because we're going to save more of that time for discussion of alternatives and some of that.
All right, so we'll keep rolling. And as a reminder, we do have all of the existing condition data from the first phase of the project on the Metro Plan Orlando project website, if anyone is interested. Okay, for
Wait, we got Aaron, raise your hand real quick.
go ahead, Erin.
Hi, Megan. I have a quick question for you about I guess I expected to see like some data or a snapshot of the feedback that we've got, and like a little pie chart that says everybody wants this. Do we have anything like that? Like I was hearing the feedback that you described, but have we quantified that yet? Or are we waiting until the study's totally over to understand that?
We have been tracking responses on a bi-weekly basis.
Yeah, but as far as like a summary and total feedback, we're trying to capture like the high level feedback and then kind of hear from you all's discussion today too. But
Okay.
so and a lot of the questions we asked was generally just how positive did you feel about the alternatives and how familiar were you with some of the techniques.
Right.
and tools.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I think
So-
we want to understand as we try to move this into design. So we're really excited to get that information. Thanks.
Maybe if we keep going, Melissa, you can pull any stats we have, and we can maybe next update. You think you have it? If not, it's okay.
We do go in a little bit more detail about some of the questions we asked later on in the presentation, but I know that we were looking to collect it all once the survey was like totally done.
I think
okay, great.
Beverly had a quick question.
Yeah.
She had concern about the stop signs and option what we have. Right now, we weren't proposing any additional stop signs necessarily along the main thoroughfare. Those are really hard to warrant, like multi-way stops. So right now, the approach has been to not necessarily add new stop signs, but we'll take into consideration what your concern about that and just note it for that as we keep going with the alternative. Questions? All right, go ahead, Megan, I guess.
All right. As we approach the typical section alternatives, we did split the corridor into these 3 areas, if you'll remember from the first visioning team meeting. And that was based on the corridor characteristics surrounding land use and available right-of-way. The blue and the orange areas have 50 feet of available right-of-way, while the green area has 80 feet of right-of-way. So the typical section options are going to be a little bit different for these areas. And before we show the proposed, we did just want to share the full menu of options that was considered for these different areas. I'll go through some pros and cons with them as well, but we approached it without adding any constraints. So we looked at option 2 with a shared use path, option 3 with widened sidewalks, so going from 5 to about 7.5 of sidewalk width with a 4-foot buffer for a landscape. We looked at option 4, which was increasing the sidewalk width a little bit, but also adding an on-street parking lane. Option 5 included on-street bike lanes. And option 6 would be a low stress in option 6, bike lanes are great because they provide dedicated space, but unfortunately we wouldn't be able to fit a buffer in, given the constrained right-of-way, so it's lower than the recommended 7-foot standard. Option 4 and 3, there are some challenges with finding dedicated space for bicyclists. We looked at an evaluation matrix comparing the options qualitatively. You can see we use a scale of 1 through 4, with 4 being the worst and excellent being the best.
Megan?
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, people are saying your audio is not good.
Yeah, could you go back to the previous slide? I think some folks were having some audio issues for probably about the first half of your slide 24. Yeah, if you could just kind of re-go over the option issues.
Sure. I was talking about the pros and cons of the different options. And while there are great features of all of them, for the sake of elimination, I'm going to touch on some of the cons. Option 6 was the low stress bike route. That would be either 1 block north or 1 block south of 10th Street on 9th or 11th. We started to view this as an add-on option, not something that would replace any improvements to 10th Street. In option 5, the bike lanes provided dedicated space for those bicyclists. Although within the constrained right-of-way, there isn't room to add a buffer between the bike lane and the vehicle lanes, so they end up being below the recommended 7 feet. In option 4, again, there's a challenge with adding a dedicated space for bicyclists in option 4 and in option 3. Although it provides great pedestrian comfort, any bicycle wanting to use the facility might have a challenge finding where they belong. I hope my audio is a little better now. I'll keep rolling to the next slide if we don't see any chat. I'm not seeing. Yeah, I can see it. We looked at these options from a qualitative 4-point scale, where poor was the worst and excellent was the best. We created criteria for each of the goal areas, so for safety, for health, economy. And if you look at it, in the green, you can start to see that option 2 merges and option 3 also merges the space options to their ability to save pedestrians. And option 3, you get the parking lanes, but you also okay. How do we try stopping video? And that may improve the connection.
It doesn't make any sense if you're calling in.
Yeah, the call-in not, it sounded weird.
Be able to switch.
Let me just try to switch my audio real quick.
All right, I think we're back, everyone.
We can hear you much better. Thank you, Megan.
Okay, well, so I'm connected through the computer now, so let us know if it's choppy again. Apologize for the issues. Okay, so the evaluation matrix. We looked at these options on a 4-point scale from poor, fair, good to excellent. And there's criteria for each of the goal areas: safety, health, economy, and community. And if you look for the blue excellence and the green goods, you can see that option 2 starts to emerge as having the biggest benefit over the other options due to its ability to accommodate the multiple modes, bikes and pedestrians. Option 4 is also in a close running with option 2 because it allows parking, which is criteria under the economy goal. We did the same thing for the Suburban Transition segment, that green area you saw earlier with the 80 feet of right-of-way. Because there's more space in this area, really only 3 options were required. The second one has a shared use path and parking, while as option 3 has bike lanes and parking. We do show how the right-of-way could be maximized here. So you'll notice that there's parking on both sides of the road and a shared use path on both sides of the road. But we recognize it may not necessarily be needed based on the area. We did just want to show what the maximum street use could look like. We had similar pros and cons with these options. One of the main cons with the bike lanes in option 3 is that pedestrians have extra asphalt to cross. So it doesn't make it as easy as just crossing 2 lanes of traffic. They also have an additional 10 to 14 feet to cross. Using the same evaluation criteria and the same matrix, we use that 4-point rating scale again, and you'll see that the excellent in the blue and the good in the green starts to become more dominant in option 2 with the shared use path. So that was the thought process when looking at the menu of options for 10th Street. Through some preliminary discussions with the Metro Plan Orlando and the city, we did identify that a shared use path would be the preferred alternative for 10th Street. And this is partially because it could be carried all the way from Narcoossee Road to US 192. Well, the bike lanes are an attractive option potentially in the eastern end. It would be difficult to carry them through the orange and the blue without a buffer, and may lead to a more unsafe condition where cyclists aren't comfortable traveling against the vehicle traffic. We did see some value in considering parking moving forward. We know there's a parking garage going in downtown, but the on-street parking was thought of as supplementing some of the future businesses that might pop up along 10th Street a little bit outside of the downtown area. So you'll see we actually do consider that on a block by block basis. And it's part of the reason why we added these 2 additional areas to look at. The downtown area in the center is shown in gray. This area is already under a final design contract, so we're not going to propose anything new here. We'll only be proposing to tie into this area. We talked about the parking on one side of the road. The new darker orange area in the center, we're calling area 2A, the historic core. This is the approximate limits of the future commercial land use. So we expected that this would be a good idea to consider parking where there would be reasonable origins and destinations for vehicles to park and travel to. We did want to note that there are some challenges with implementing the shared use path. There really would have been challenges with any of the alternatives, but these are just some that are specific to the shared use path option. And we have some images to help supplement what we're explaining here on the next slide. But the roadway center line is not directly in the middle of the right-of-way. So there's more right-of-way on one side of the road than the other. For this reason, the roadway center line may need to shift a little bit. We're talking 2 to 4 feet in some locations to make sure that we meet minimum offset criteria for any new sidewalk or any new trail that's proposed. The original intent was also to keep the trail on a single side of the road, but for that same right-of-way challenge is likely going to need to cross at one location east of Mississippi and Eastern Avenue. With the landscape buffers, we intend to make them wide enough to have trees, but we can't really guarantee that there'll be shade trees necessarily. It would be some sort of landscaping. So with that, I want to jump ahead to some of these pictures that explain those challenges. In item 1, another challenge would be that the shared use path may need to narrow from the preferred 10 feet down to 8 feet, or possibly even tighter in really constrained areas because of the large power poles that are on the western end of the corridor. We know there are wooden power poles as well, but we're considering those as able to be moved or relocated, and we'll be asking for feedback if you guys agree with that approach as well. Image 2 shows an aerial view of 10th Street with those teal blue lines being the right-of-way lines. You'll notice that the south side of the road has more space between that right-of-way line and the road, which explains why the road may need to shift to the south in some locations. Similarly, with item 3, see that the right-of-way is really bumped up right against the road, so the shared use path will likely need to be on the opposing side. If this is picked up for final design, they'll certainly need a survey to confirm all of these assumptions, but these are the bounds that we're working within right now. Okay, so this is the proposed typical section for the blue and the orange areas on the bottom right side of your screen. The bottom left shows you the existing condition for reference. Right now, it's mostly swales and ditches as conveying the drainage. There's not curb throughout the entire area. So in our proposed on the right, there would be new curb and gutter. Some of those ditches would need to be filled in to make room for a new sidewalk. And the shared use path would be on the opposing side of the road. We also show these landscaped areas with pedestrian scale lighting to make it comfortable for everyone using the facility. And now we want to hear from you. In the chat, if you could let us know what you think of this proposed option. Do you like it or dislike it? And feel free to add any commentary or questions you have. And Melissa will scroll through the chat.
Yeah, we actually already have some comments while you were talking. Beverly asked if it would be possible to relocate the access paths to a parallel street to accommodate the curve in the roadway, which I think we do kind of talk about in the Suburban Transition one a little bit, but I don't know if you want to touch on that now, Megan.
Yeah, I think Jeff has a answer already.
Okay.
I was going to say, we looked at that, Beverly, about whether or not we could transition, but where the road actually curves or jogs, there's actually not, like, you lose the parallel network. So east of the parallel network, the east of Eastern and Mississippi, there's not a parallel network to be able to like shift the jog down to that was reasonable without getting too far out of the way. So we were concerned about that. That's kind of the answer and thought process. If you can see it on the map up above. Aaron can't hear. I'm using Megan's sound, so I'm in the same room as Megan. Can you hear me now? That we looked at the parallel network and we could not, because there's not a parallel network east of Mississippi, there's not an ability to shift or jog the route. Did you hear that, Aaron? Alex, am I coming through okay?
I could sort of hear, but it was very muffled. I'm just trying to understand the engineering stuff, and I feel like that's what you're saying.
I know you have some staff from OUC on, but from my experience working with OUC, when you talk about the humongous poles,
Jeff, if you could, we're all having trouble hearing you, and to Aaron's point, you are providing some interesting information. I don't know if you want to slide over on Megan's side of the table just to make sure the microphone is picking you up. It sounds really light.
Can you guys hear me better now?
Much better, at least on my end.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, you're not connected with the Jabber. So the answer to the question was the large power poles at that size and scale of it's usually like hundreds of thousands of dollars to relocate those, and there's not very good places to do it with other utility conflicts in the ground. With just such a narrow and tight right of way, that's always been a challenge. And then I think I already answered the question on the curve, and there's not a good parallel network.
On in relation to the larger metal power poles, I know we do have a couple members from OUC on the line, wondering if they would be able to provide some insight from their end.
Another comment from Paula Stark, talking about relocating the power poles probably being necessary. And then we have another chat saying the smaller wooden pole distribution poles are much easier to deal with in terms of relocating, which is what we were thinking as well.
So I think that's feedback we can definitely take as we advance into kind of next step discussions
Sounds like we
with the
could be
city.
in agreement that the wooden power poles are eligible for relocating.
Yeah, I don't know what, Adonis, if you want to give any guidance. Can you hear me better now? Is our sound better in this room, hopefully? She's asking about undergrounding them. Yeah. Adonis, do you want to maybe chime in, take yourself off of mute?
Okay. So yeah, the distribution poles, they are certainly much easier to deal with in terms of relocating them or even undergrounding.
But it looks like you're talking.
Yeah, we can hear. I can hear Adonis on our end. Adonis, continue.
Okay.
I don't hear Alex.
Oh, you didn't change it.
Okay.
All right. You guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So yeah, what I was saying is the distribution poles, which are the wooden ones that you see along there, they are definitely much easier to work with in terms of being able to relocate them or even possibly look at undergrounding them, the lines that are on them. That is a much easier prospect than the steel ones. The steel ones, the time constraints in terms, because they're engineered and designed poles, so there would be tremendous time constraints, and we'd have to go through design engineering firms and then more than likely go to the commission for approval, and so it just becomes a much longer process to have to deal with doing anything with the steel poles. The wooden poles, though, they present a much easier option. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, well, we're not funded for design or construction right now, so time is on our side. But I know, I think Aaron wanted to maybe chime in on that, and I think Emily had some thoughts too.
Yeah, I just have a quick question since we're on this slide, and then some questions more on the corridor in general. For this slide, if the power poles are on it's the major transmission line metal giant poles are on one side, why is that the side that the shared use path is on? Is it just because of the alignment of the roadway within the right of way makes that still more feasible than putting the shared use on the other side?
Yeah, that was the approach because of those aerial images we saw with the right of way being really close to that north side of the road. We can continue to evaluate putting it on the north side, but we would likely run into some of the similar issues of having to narrow at locations.
Yeah, I know you guys always have a logic for what you're recommending, so I just, without like survey level detail, I just want to understand so that if those questions are asked of us, we can explain what that is. And then in general, you mentioned and I think you were speaking specifically about the historic grid area, then you've identified some locations due to where the center line of the road is, that the road may need to be shifted. Of course, that costs a lot too. And just curious, do you have any what kind of information do you have on how many of those areas there are? And have you like flagged them on a map that we can get later so we can just get our head around the scale of that?
We are still working through that. But like I said, it would be somewhere in the order of 2 to 4 feet. It may not be for the entire blue and orange areas, but that's something we'll get a little bit more into as we start drawing up the concept. Jeff, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just say too, Aaron, like where we are right now is we're just trying to make sure that we're not jumping too far ahead with what the goal typical section ideal will be. We feel like we've got proposed typicals that people have supported and the public has supported, and kind of really after this meeting and then after survey close, that's when we'll really start figuring out exactly some dimension details and making sure we can fit the path in and where we might have to shift the roads. So you're thinking through a lot of the challenges that we're going to be tackling, and we've kind of looked at it in some spot locations, but along the whole corridor, we have not, with like every single block, we don't have all that figured out yet.
Right, that makes total sense, and thank you for explaining it. That of course, yeah, we're going to get these recommendations of alternatives, and then get into the nitty gritty. Our head is just in capital improvements programming now, and I think the city is in support. We have heard regarding funding design, so that'll be within the 5 years. So we appreciate you guys helping to get us numbers that we can start to build on.
Do you want to hear from Emily now?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jeff and Megan, for that presentation. I wanted to circle back to my comments in the chat regarding the transmission lines and such. And in certain trail projects where you can prove that this potential connection is an opportunity to not only get cyclists to be able to move safely through a community, but also pedestrians as well. And Adonis, you seem to be a nice guy. I've never met you before, but willing to work within the constraints of improving this for the entire public. That if you do have a constraint, 1 or 2 locations that maybe don't totally throw out the opportunity to maybe move said obstacle, whatever that might be. I know there's been some creative solutions of some transmission lines out west of their construction and how they kind of sit on or straddle, if you will, the trail. So I think there are opportunities to get creative if that is constrained. And just as a reminder too, you guys are doing an excellent job of prepping us for building the what hopefully is this road improvement that will increase the likelihood of people shopping and walking and living in the community of St. Cloud. And so I think prioritizing people first, and that if that means spending a little bit more money to move a transmission line to have a much better project at the end that's going to last in this community for 30 plus years, it's worth it for that little bit of extra money in the short term that we're going to have to spend. So I just wanted to make that point and remind you that that's, hopefully why we're here doing the work that we do in these communities. So thank you again for allowing me to speak. Appreciate it.
I don't want to put Adonis too much on the spot, but maybe we can circle back with you later and you could kind of give us an update on any plans or things related to power line improvements that are already in the works, and also what is the art of the possible, because I know sometimes the local government has to participate in some depending on like some undergrounding and things like that. So just to try to make sure that in the range of options we understand what the costs really could be, so we can help people make educated decisions.
Great. All right, thank you, Emily. Thank you, Adonis. Thank you, Aaron. We'll go on and move on to the next typical now. And before we do that, we do have this rendering of what the downtown area is going to look like. That's part of a separate project and in final design right now. That's shown on the right-hand side. So since that's a separate project, we're not necessarily asking for new feedback on this, but we did want to show how our potential typicals would tie into it. And a good example of that is in the historic core in this dark orange area. We have parking on one side of the road. That would be a continuation from the downtown parking. And again, it was strategically added here because we know that these are the bounds of the future commercial land use. We have similar features as the last typical, which is adding new curb and gutter, continuing that shared use path, and maintaining those 10-foot vehicle lanes, which I may not have said specifically in the last slide, but some of the lanes today are only 9.5 feet. So the 10-foot is an improvement to what's out there. So with that, we'll head back to the chat. Do you all dislike this option or have questions? And we know the on-street parking and the integration of the trail with the business fronts might need to be talked through a little bit more.
Yeah, and also if anyone on the PBT maybe has thoughts on the side of the street, you can always which ones would be more ideal or not. It's really tough because like Aaron talked about, like kind of that block by block approach. We don't want to make it keep crossing back and forth. And we're kind of at that point of trying to assess that. Did any other thoughts on this as far as trying to continue the path? It's not to connect through and then provide the parking. Do you feel like we've kind of struck a decent balance here with this cross section?
I've got a question. This is Erin again. I see that the parking is only on one side, and it looks like there's similar pedestrian access on either side. I'm curious, it doesn't have like a north and a south arrow. Am I assuming that the right is north and the parking is on the south?
We have not gotten to that point where we would make that. We're still in the process of making that evaluation recommendation, but our goal is to not have the trail cross, to minimize the number of times it goes back and forth. So
right, this cross section to me has a lot of things that the area doesn't have now, including pedestrian stuff, but the on-street parking, which is with our unique downtown zoning requirements to not have parking on your lot, the on-street parking is also a critical need and win, and will be really helping support the redevelopment of the central business district. And so I guess with all of that in mind, not just pedestrians, and I'm not making this statement fully understanding where on the east and west of this the trail would be, but just in isolation in these sections, I believe that the parking needs to be on the south side of the road because the central business district is between 13th Street and 10th Street. So the places that will be converted to commercial will be likely on the south side of the road. So that, and then because there is less commercial activity on the north side of the road, that would make the pedestrians safer, potentially passing through on a shared use path, better suited to be on the north side. That's my personal opinion. There's probably others who know the downtown much better than I, but for the land use perspective and the zoning, I think that the parking's better suited on the south.
Okay.
We also have, it looks like Beverly has a few comments in the chat as well. Divert away from immovable locations. I'm not sure which part you're talking about, Beverly. I apologize.
We'll note that, Beverly. If your sound is working, you can feel free to expand a little, but we will know.
Oh, she said the curve.
Okay, understood. All right, thanks, Beverly. Do you have any others before we keep rolling, Melissa?
I'm not seeing any additional comments right now.
All right.
Thank you, Beverly.
All right, thanks for the insightful parking discussion. The last section that we have to share is the Suburban Transition, which starts just after Eastern Ave and extends to Narcoossee. This is where we have more right-of-way available. Same improvements as before, maintaining those 10-foot travel lanes, continuing the shared use path, but we do have a recommendation here for the shared use path, is that it be on the north side of the road for most of the way, because there are subdivision walls and fewer driveways. There's a single driveway for the subdivision, but as opposed to the south side, there are multiple driveways to private residences. So to keep the chance of conflicts low, we'd like to see it on the north side. We are showing pretty wide buffer areas from the roadway, with you see on the 18-foot tree area on the left and a 19-foot tree area on the right. The approach is to get the people and bikes as far away from cars as possible, but there may need to be some variations in that buffer if there's any geometric or topographic constraints. We also note that there's the historic cemetery in this area, which it does get constrained back down to about 55 feet. And we want to be sure to not encroach whatsoever into that area. So that's one location where we'll start narrowing the trail, possibly going to a sidewalk if needed to avoid any impacts there. So do we have any thoughts on this typical like, dislike?
Well, I know, Megan, we've also got to get to the intersections. I want to make sure we leave time for that discussion too.
This is Christina. I live in that area and I actually like the proposed, so anything will help out. I live near the cemetery, so.
Great, thank you. It's always great to hear from people who live right on the corridor.
And Megan, one more thought. I think I've seen the survey for the north side of the cemetery, and I think there's about 5 feet between the property line and the fence, and the city would be willing to get engaged in an easement there if that could get us a full 60 feet. So hopefully we can keep the continuity going.
Great, thanks, Erin. Okay, so we have about half an hour left. We do have some survey feedback to talk about before we get to the intersection options. I'll let Melissa describe some of the highlights here.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, so what we've been seeing so far, actually of the typicals that we've shown, 77% of the respondents said that they loved or liked the suburban transition improvements the most. 72% liked or loved the historic road improvements, and then 68 liked or loved the medical arts and historic core improvements. We've gotten some supportive comments. They were really liking the ideas that we had, but some people didn't like the typicals in that they weren't really receptive to the idea. They didn't totally understand that we're not intending to take the right of way. So that's been a concern a lot of people have said in the survey. They think, you know, they're going to lose their property or lose their yards, which again, we're not intending to do. So I think that that's an area that we can improve on, you know, committing that idea that's not what we're trying to do. But otherwise, everything, the typicals seem to be really well received.
And since we had no questions or comments on the last typical, I'll keep rolling to the intersections, which is our last area to cover. There is a lot to take in on this slide, so while we all kind of look at the options along the corridor, I'll explain our approach to the intersection solutions and why we selected certain intersections for treatment versus not others. We looked at this first and foremost from the crash history perspective. We definitely wanted to target intersections like Columbia, Michigan, and Orange, where we saw injury severities higher than other locations. And we do know there's some data out there. Emily, we saw that the GIS dashboard for driver yield rates is live by Best Foot Forward, and we saw Michigan Avenue is one of the lowest driver yield rate locations along the 10th Street corridor. So that was the number one way we picked location, was based on safety concerns. The second was where cross streets had a signal at 192. So you'll see at that same location, Michigan, at Delaware, at Old Hickory Tree. These are opportunities for drivers to make a left turn from US 192 and start heading toward 10th Street. So we wanted to make sure once they got to 10th Street that it was an indication to drivers that you're now entering this lower speed community, and it is a transition from the state highway system to a local roadway system. And with that, I'll hop through some of these intersection ideas. I'll start on the right-hand side where there are the series of 3 mini roundabouts. And this ties back to those vehicle speeds we saw along the corridor being higher in this area, with roundabouts being a really proven way to reduce vehicle speeds and injury severity. We would propose them at these locations, which are spaced quite nicely between each other. A mini roundabout would likely need to be 90 feet across or less, so it's not going to be your standard modern roundabout. The center island could also be traversable so that trucks can circulate the roundabout more easily. We would consider trucks and also school buses that need to use the area. We don't want to impede any movements with the roundabout. Getting closer to downtown, we start considering painted, raised, or textured intersections. It could be something like that's already on New York and having those brick texture onto these specific intersections. And this is to indicate to drivers that they're getting to the downtown core. It's a transition from the outer ends of the study area to the central business district. Moving along to Dakota, California, near Vermont. We would like to install RFBs and pedestrian median refuges at several locations along the corridor, but this was one that really stuck out since it was near the school. With the median refuges, there are some trade-offs we have to consider, which is why we haven't identified additional locations yet. And that is to make room for your minimum pedestrian refuge island in the center. It does require the road to bow out a little and potentially take space away from the buffer or the shared use path width. So it's a trade-off we have to think about when we're finding locations for these refuges. And finally, on Columbia Ave, the city has, since we started this study, there's been a four-way stop installed there. So the traffic circle may or may not be a necessary improvement based on the way the four-way stop is received by the public and working as a traffic control measure. And the last thing I do want to note before we open it up to discussion is that these are still working locations. This was just based on the data that we saw, but we're still adding locations based on what we hear from the public. The one at Vermont that you see we highlight as a new location, which didn't necessarily show up as a location with a lot of crashes, but we heard from many, many people that Vermont was a location they were very concerned with. But I know we have a lot to unpack here, but we'll ask for the same thing here, like or dislike some of the options in the chat. If you have different ideas or want to talk through the mini roundabouts more. Yes, Emily.
Hey, one of the things I wanted to mention, sorry, I didn't realize my camera was off, was the Robinson Crosswalk is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, City of St. Cloud, that's where the 55 and over senior living community is, I believe. It's like 55 Mark, I think is the name, and it's somewhat low income. And we hear from those residents that they walk often to downtown. And I know that's as you approach kind of the highway, so maybe drivers leaving the corridor would be more likely to speed or try to make that next light. So maybe considering enhancing that crosswalk that's there. We have pretty poor yield rates for that location as well. And there is a vulnerable community that is there. And I likely is probably not going to go anywhere anytime soon.
Thanks, Emily. Great point.
We're getting some chats. Paula mentioned she didn't think the painted intersections would be conducive to the historic character of the historic district, which raises the question as to whether the information will go in front of the Historic Preservation Board for input. And then she's concerned about the mini roundabouts, especially orange.
Sure. I can start by talking about the painted and then pass off to Jeff to talk some more about the roundabouts. And Paula, your concern was also what we heard from the public survey. It was the least familiar option. And people generally added in open-ended comment sections that they weren't as excited for the painted intersections. So we know we're good.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing, is like a lot of the intersections now too, like you could do the brick, but so we did hear that feedback. As far as whether it would go to the Historic Preservation Board, I'd have to defer a little bit to the city to chime in with, but the normal process would be, at this point, Metro Plan's just laying out a vision and framework for some concepts. And at the design phase, I would think as a city, like as a design phase project, that might be the time where the furnishing details, because we're pretty far off from actually implementing, that the project would need to go to the Historic Preservation Board. Just like, so I'm not sure Aaron or anyone wants to chime in on that, but
yeah, this is Erin. We are looking at a corridor with similar pedestrian type improvements. And we just finished a study where there's a basket of alternatives that was presented. And I think we've been coordinating with Public Works as well. I'm not sure if they're on the call now, but we anticipate there being some internal process and public hearing or survey process, public participation process to make those decisions. One, because they're costly, so we need to make sure everybody's on board before we design them, because we don't want to work real hard on stuff that they walk out of the project at the end due to cost. And so then we can schedule funding accordingly for the design and those things. One of the features that we really liked on Michigan Ave, which intersects with this project at 10th Street, is the pedestrian median refuge option. And that, when necessary, combined with an RRFB, is really effective. As a planner, I appreciate for aesthetics consistency, and I think for engineering purposes, consistency is, having something be predictable and repeatable is important. So I think we're headed there, and Paula, certainly within the Historic Preservation Board, they will probably play a role in what's approved within their boundaries.
and then I'm not sure what Paula's specific concerns about the mini roundabouts are.
Well, I
Yeah,
can
as
tell
far
you
as
from a
when we
traffic
talk to members of-
perspective, we're seeing a lot of traffic studies that are putting trips on 10th Street. They're within the, this is within the 2-mile limits of a lot of development that's happening to the south and east of here. And even a subdivision recently approved the other day for along 10th Street, right? So it's a hot area, and these roundabouts for in lieu of a signal, which may never be justified, are certainly an improvement that we could even get developers to contribute to if there's some proportionate share opportunities. But in my opinion, it is better than just the T intersection that exists there now in some places in the stop control, because that produces the shooting the gap type dangerous movements cutting across. And they also calm speed too, which is helpful for the intersections in between.
As far as the capacity of putting in a roundabout there, these intersections at like Orange or any of the other cross streets and 10th would be so far from having any capacity issues with the roundabout. Like I said, there's an unfamiliarity with it, but the reality is if you did a series of the main roundabouts along the intersection, it would be a good way to slow people down. Every single vehicle that's going through them would have to slow down. Whereas if it's no traffic control, then people will just be able to go as fast as they feel comfortable driving every single time. And if it were a signal, they don't slow down when it's a green light. Sometimes they. So there's a lot of data on, we can talk more later, Paula, but it's the traffic studies on roundabouts have shown to be a big safety improvement. So, and just the severity of an intersection, because anytime when there's crashes, they're not high speed crashes and they're not abrupt angle crashes. And those are the ones that people die during, and the roundabouts prevent those. So this is like the part of when we talk to the public, and we've actually talked to a lot of people that some didn't, a lot of people actually like the roundabouts that we talked to. I really didn't get as many people who disliked them. A few had concerns, but it's just a good tool in the toolbox. I think someone tried to say a lot of the benefits of the 4-way stop without having to stop every time. It slows people down.
And Jeff, this is Erin again. I should add, this is the county segment of the road. So, the city's on board, but really it's a county decision in this segment. I'm curious if any of them are on the line now.
And yeah, not sure. So I think Steve's on. And I'm not sure, Beverly, why putting in a median refuge makes the crosswalk enforcement any different. If there's a crosswalk there or not, I'm not sure I understand. Because coming to and from school is half hour, 40 minutes in the morning, half hour, 40 minutes on school days, but you still have all those other hours of the day that the refuge is a real big benefit to making it so people have a way to cross halfway and cross the rest of the way. Maybe make better decisions when they're trying to cross the street. So, but I'm not sure how that changes with enforcement or intervention, because I don't know if the school crossing, because we're not talking about school crossing guards. I mean, Emily's involved in the enforcement of crosswalk issues all the time. I don't know if she has any thoughts on that.
There are a couple conditions where the landscaping makes it difficult to see the little ones as they step from that pedestrian refuge island into the crosswalk. So my comment would be just either have no landscaping and have it be some kind of decorative brick and pavement, or keep the shrubs very, very low so that you can see and have great visibility.
And any comment on the enforcement?
I mean, I've never, we don't collect data when the crossing guards are doing their work because we don't want to interfere with them. And they have a lot to do when they're out there for those few hours directing traffic and dealing with impatient people in the car line. She said the location identified is not qualified for crossing guards. I've never heard that, Beverly. All the studies and research and everything that we've indicated have shown that pedestrian refuge islands are actually very, very safe and provide that refuge for someone to take a break and not have to cross the entire road, especially if it is a little bit wide and daunting. And for enforcement purposes, I've never heard that as well. And I've worked with law enforcement officers on motor units, or I should say motorcycles that go over grassed medians on a regular basis when we're doing our city and county enforcement operations. So I don't think that anything that we construct is not mountable for them to go after the violator if a infraction has been found. So I hope that answers your question. I'd be happy to chat with you offline about that as well.
Are there any other locations that people feel like we missed or need to have more of a focus on? I know Vermont was one we got a lot during being at the markets as an intersection that we didn't have in our initial possible. I know Tennessee has a light, I believe, as well. We hadn't really heard as much about Tennessee. But any other thoughts?
Jeff, maybe your analysis already reflects this, but at Florida Ave, of course, our Parks Department has been heading up a trail there. I believe Florida Ave currently has sidewalks on either side, but they're proposing a wide trail in the center median, is my understanding. That's in flux and in progress. But for that reason, there may be extra users on that corridor in the future. So I'm not sure how we deal with that crossing.
I think it's a four-way stop right now, and it's part of the initial design that's going on. So that we really, if you've got it already at a four-way stop, and I think there's marked crosswalks, those would probably be items to try to get incorporated in this initial design project.
Yeah, it's a pickle because like if they're in a raised median trail setting, they can't cross in the very middle of the intersection when the striped crosswalks are on the side of it, right? So then you've got to get at every crossing or at a handful of crossings, you'll have to get out of the middle onto the side, cross, get back in the middle. It's a unique circumstance. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think the stop worked when there wasn't a trail in the median. So we may have to get our heads around that.
Okay. Well, we can try to reflect whatever the desire is.
For the record, just to be clear, that is the section that is already under design by the city.
Correct. Okay. Yes. So I think we've got 13 minutes left, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. Do you have any other? I think we got a little bit survey feedback, and then kind of a wrap up. Correct?
Yes. So we've gotten some feedback on these potential intersection solutions as well. Surprisingly, yes, the mini roundabouts and the traffic circle RFPs and median refuge islands were the most familiar to the survey respondents, with the raised intersections and the painted intersections not being as familiar. The painted intersections were probably the one that we've seen the least positive or supportive feedback about. I know Emily in the chat had made a comment saying that, painted intersections can be more muted colors. When we were picking that picture, it was very bright and vibrant because we wanted to get across to people that this is how it would look, to give them that visual. But I think some people didn't like how bright and colorful it was in the intersection. Some people thought it would be confusing, which you'll see in some of the open responses below. So definitely the more muted tone might have been a better way, but there were also, on top of the familiarity, supportive comments about the roundabouts as well, like we mentioned before.
So now these are our next steps. As a reminder, our public survey closes at the end of February. And our next outreach event is going to be the St. Cloud Monthly Market in April. It's the last Wednesday of the month. So I think that turns out to be April 27th. And we will be bringing out concept drawings to that event to kind of get a block by block idea of what the shared use path could look like and where those pinch points might be. So with that, we'll take any last questions and wrap up and transition to public comments. See any final comments, Melissa, or do you look like we're good?
Yeah, Lorena said great presentation, thank you. And as a reminder, the department's focus is more on target speeds and pedestrian safety, and then give the name of who's leading the effort. So if we want to contact him, we can. Thank you, Lorena.
Okay, well, with 10 minutes left, I'll turn it back over to Alex and just thank everyone again one more time for making this an interactive session and providing feedback. It was really helpful, and we look forward to taking this into the concept phase.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Megan. So this is that time in the agenda where we are going to open things up for public comment. I am not seeing any members of the public who have joined us, at least on the Zoom platform. But again, if any members of the public wish to be heard, please use that raise hand, or if you're dialed in online, press *9 on your phone keypad, and you'll be recognized to speak. We'll just give a moment just in case I'm not seeing anything, and so we'll just give that just a second here. So, yeah, I believe, Cynthia, can you confirm to me if a member of the public was on the phone, they would be showing up in the attendees just with a phone number associated? Perfect.
That's correct. Yeah, I don't see any members of the public with us on the attendee side.
All right, thank you for that confirmation. And just to provide a little more kind of next step, we will be meeting with the city. We'll be reaching out actually in the next few days to be setting up a meeting to start talking about these preferred alternatives and helping us, provide a little more insight before we start getting into drawing the concept from kind of end to end of the corridor. So a lot of the feedback that we received today will kind of be front and center as we meet with the city to look at next steps and how we intend to move forward with a concept drawing. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there that Aaron will be in touch with you and Kevin, and we'll put all the city departments together to have another workshop to work through this. And other than that, unless we have any other comments from any members, now's a good time. We have a few more minutes. Not that I want to take you all till 3:30, but before we sign off, any other feedback, thoughts, insights? Aaron, last words.
Hopefully not last, but I just have a question about how can we promote the ongoing survey that's happening. We've got front counters in many of our offices. We have OUC here, just right on the corridor. And so we also I'm sure there's folks with our CRA who may want to reach out to businesses. Do you guys have like a graphic that you can give us that we can cut up into little cards and distribute, or something we can send to a printer that's already been designed?
Yeah, sure. So Cynthia's been working with Mary Emma in the communications department. We've actually just provided her some high resolution graphics for each of the alternatives. We've also, next week we'll actually be at the St. Cloud Chamber, presenting to Dirk's group next Thursday morning at their quarterly breakfast event. I believe we're also in your mayor's newsletter just earlier this week. I saw that. So we're getting some of that publicity. And I believe we were also in the, was it the Spanish newspaper? I'm not sure of the name, Cynthia, if you could provide
I
that.
can chime in a little bit. So I know Miriam has been great about helping us distribute the survey. It was in the city newsletter in the January city newsletter that goes out. And it's also, as Alex mentioned, it ran in the El Osceola Star, Spanish publication down in Osceola, and then Mayor Blackwell had it in his Positively Osceola column that he does. In addition, we're going to be doing a lot of social media. We're going to be running a social media advertisement the last week before the survey closes, and we've seen a lot of success with that in previous phases. So hopefully that'll bump up the respondents. Usually people like to procrastinate and they don't participate in the survey until they kind of see the 1 week left notice. So we're also going to be doing some constant contact emails to the study distribution list that has several hundred folks on it. So we do hope to see that number bumped up, but any help that you can give us in spreading the word, please, we welcome that. And we do have graphics that we can share, and as well as like the short link to the survey.
That's great. I'm also seeing Lilani from our office just mentioned that our 10th Street video, which includes an overview of the typical, has received a little over 2,000 views at this time. So and growing. And as Cynthia mentioned, from our past experience, when we started that kind of targeted social media ad campaign, the numbers really started really rolling in, kind of multiplying greater than any of our other mailer or other options. But Aaron, I'll definitely follow up with you and make sure that you have access to those visuals.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, if the video has 2,000 views and we haven't gotten a bunch of angry survey comments, that's a really good sign from a public participation perspective. So we're taking that as a good thing.
Great. So I'm still not seeing any members of the public, so we can kind of move on. And I think with that, or kind of I'll say last call to any other members who wish to speak here. I don't believe so, based on head nods. But so this is Megan and I's contact information. You probably already have it from our emailing of this project visioning team. But again, if you have any questions, anything before the next time we reach out to you, do not hesitate to contact us. And if not, we'll be in touch soon, especially with the city, to start talking next steps for concept drawing. So again, I appreciate everyone's time joining us this afternoon. And we look forward to hearing more from you in the coming weeks. So thanks again, and everyone have a great rest of your week.